Shenmue II HD Review.
Since Species.
G'day invaders and welcome to Since Species. A short while back I reviewed Shenmue I HD on the channel and I was so happy to be given the chance to be finally playing this classic on a new console, complete with achievements, screenshots and all the other benefits that come with modern gaming. So we now have come to reviewing Shenmue II HD for the channel. And I want to point out that the reason why I chose to split this review into two was that I felt that the two titles deserved to be looked at on their own merits. So we finally get to see Ryo embark on his big journey as his adventure is really only just beginning. We pick up from the immediate end of Shenmue I, or do we? Apparently the journey over to Hong Kong was intended to be another chapter in itself. However, due to time constraints, it was omitted from the final game. The mother thanking you for saving her daughter when you exit the ship is a legacy from that original development plan.
To her on the ship when she was scared. Well, take care of yourself.
Bye, Rio.
Goodbye.
Interesting little nugget of curiosity right there that remains in the game for all eternity. To bring you up to speed, for those of you who are unaware about Shenmue or you're just curious as to what all the fuss is about, Shenmue takes place in the mid-1980s in a small town called Yokosuka, and you follow the path of Ryo Hazuki, whose father was killed by a mysterious Chinese man named Lan Di. Ryo is sworn to seek revenge and is led to a much bigger mystery than he's probably initially bargained for. Without ruining the storyline to Shenmue 1, it's safe to say that you are now led on a path to Hong Kong and then to China as you investigate what happens.
I said, hello? You need something?
Given that this game was developed in conjunction with the first title, you'll find that both games are in fact very much identical at first, but there are some key differences that need to be discussed. You are now given the option to simply wait if you need to be meeting with someone at a particular time of the day, or if you need to wait for a shop to open. This can kind of ruin the immersive feeling of the game as the world speeds up to get to that designated time, as you miss out on the side effects that could have taken place if you were to just wander the streets, but it's an added option for those of you who choose to take up the offer. Also, if you are lost or unable to orientate yourself for your next target, you can now simply ask a stranger to guide you to the location.
Which way is it to the Green Market Quarter?
I'll take you there. Follow me.
Okay, thanks.
Think of it as slow travel as opposed to fast travel, as you'll skip to the next location but only after you watch Ryo walk slowly behind some generous person offering to help you.
This one right here.
Oh, right. Thanks.
See ya.
Other new additions to the sequel are improved graphics, as this is actually a port of the Xbox version, which introduced new effects such as sun glare and better water animations. Also added is a much more steady frame rate than the original titles, and of course lower loading times. We also see a much grander experience with many more shops and rooms to explore than in the first title. This is most evident in the massive skyscraper building that is in the rundown town of Kowloon. Known as the Yellowhead Building, you must make your way to the top of this rundown building, and you truly get a scale of how big this game truly is when you realize that all the rooms can be explored with an Easter egg found in one of those rooms. The way that some of the generic rooms are generated are actually quite a technical feat and was designed to cut down development time but maximize the feeling of being in a much grander game. Yu Suzuki, the head developer of Shenmue II, called this technology the magic room effect, and it's just so ahead of its time, with all the room contents being randomly generated to match the layout of the room. All the things that make Shenmue I a standout title return, with NPCs adhering to a schedule of working, relaxing, eating and sleeping. We also see varied weather patterns returned, And of course the real-time pattern to adhere to is returning as well. You now find yourself in a much larger environment than in Shenmue 1. Also, the fact that you are a stranger in this city really changes up the atmosphere of the game. You are surrounded by strangers, some of them hostile, some of them willing to help you, but you have no real way of knowing who's who at first. This certainly adds a lot of angst to the storyline, and you truly begin to see Ryo Testi's character as a result. You are introduced to new characters in this game. You'll meet Joy, who is a motorcycle girl who has a soft spot for Ryo, and she possesses a kind of tomboy personality.
Watch where you're going, you punk!
That goes for you too, barging into people like that.
You must be Japanese.
You have Wong, who's a street kid with loads of street smarts, but deep down has a kind heart.
You guys help me, okay?
Hey, wait!
Lastly, you'll have Ren, who's a kind of a Han Solo type character who's looking for adventure and profit, but not exactly a bad guy after all.
Oh, alright, you win.
Of course, you'll also meet up with plenty of new enemy characters to spice up the storyline. Admittedly, these characters are fairly cartoonish by today's standards, but they add to the large roster of key roles that this game has. Something that Shenmue II seems to do better than the first game is flesh out some of the characters and their backstory. When you meet your master, for example, you get to find out more about the reason for her becoming a master to begin with.
I'll take my revenge even if I have to sell my soul.
No! What'll happen to me if I lose you too?
I'll be back, I promise.
No! Please don't go.
This was something that I truly appreciated. The fact that this game attempts to do any kind of character development at all is truly amazing, considering that this was released in an era where storylines in games were mostly a secondary concern. But it was also because of Yu Suzuki and the game devs like him that this began to change in this era. I find that the controls are a little less stiff in this sequel, but still not up to modern gaming standards. You also will have the ability to save anywhere. I personally found this to be the single biggest addition to the sequel. Having to run back home to save proved to be a tiresome chore in some sections of the original game, but luckily we don't have this issue in Ryo's second outing. You can now purchase maps that offer you some kind of assistance, but the maps are a little hard to make out. I guess as a gamer in 2018, I've become spoilt with modern gaming head-up displays, etc. What's also changed though, however, is the pacing of the game. Given that Ryo now finds himself in a much larger landscape, the game seems to have problems on focusing on what needs to be done next. For example, you must work to raise money now to earn a night's rest. Sure, you could say that this adds up to the realism of the game, but after you spend 5 to 6 hours of your day moving crap around for the boss man, you are not any wiser as to the whereabouts of Land D, so you'll end up skipping these manual labor parts to earn money. There are several other instances of the game becoming bogged down in tedious moments in order to add some kind of challenge to the game, but it only tests your patience and not your gaming ability in these parts.
We make the perfect pair. Okay.
There's so much to do in Shenmue II as there was in Shenmue 1. You can now collect toy capsules as you could in Japan. You can now gamble at one of the many lucky hit stands, or you can run a pachinko lucky hit stand of your own.
Yeah. My turn now.
You can fight against opponents in sideshow style arranged fighting matches around the city. You'll also be able to take on opponents in arm wrestling, which is a combination of button mashing and QTEs, which is quick time events. You'll also be able to gamble in many dice rolling games as well. You'll be able to buy all kinds of items that may seem to have no bearing on the outcome of the game, but keep in mind that some of these items can trigger off events later in the game. You can still work a regular job in Shenmue II. This work is not paramount in the game plot, however, and is only there as a means to earn your keep in the game. The fact that you can't drive forklifts anymore is a shame, as I personally found this so satisfying in a weird way. Instead, we are left with Delon and his rather annoying grunts that will have you looking forward to knock off time real quickly.
Left. Okay, unless I tell you otherwise, keep pushing forward.
Sure.
Yeah. Right.
The combat in Shenmue 2 is pretty much on par with what you'll find in Shenmue 1. You level up different moves as you use them in combat or training. You can learn new moves by in-game events or by buying scrolls in antique stores. This system of combat is rather unique to Shenmue and is still not used in many other games to date. As with Shenmue 1, you can try and get fancy with some of the highly technical moves, but in truth you can get by with just spamming one or two powerful moves to get you out of most combat situations. You now have some moments in the game where you fight in a first-person view, and this can take some getting used to. In Shenmue 2, as in the first game, the story is paramount. Thankfully, the main voice actors don't sound like fingers down a chalkboard like the NPCs, and actually add to the atmosphere of the game. The cutscenes are groundbreaking for their time and hold up rather well in 2018. You'll be actually wanting to watch them and not wishing to skip through. You'll want to see where the story goes next, and the dialogue is quite good in parts. You can also trigger off unique cutscenes if you meet certain conditions, and you can get good outcomes or just unresolved outcomes if you fail to meet the criteria needed to have someone like you or challenge you, etc. Shenmue is mostly a detective series, and Shenmue 2 continues this style of gameplay. You'll be trying to find your way around a new city, asking for clues and getting into all kinds of dangerous and unexpected situations. I truly love the random nature of the storyline, with certain events just happening without any kind of obvious warning, and it's this aspect of Shenmue that I like the most. One part about these events is that certain NPCs can change their approach to you and make references to an event that just took place. For an example, you'll be fighting some lowlifes at a restaurant in one scene, but if you go back to that person, the owner of the restaurant, later, she'll chastise you for causing trouble.
I don't want you making a disturbance like that again.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The amount of dialogue in this game, even if it is badly voice acted by NPCs, is mind-blowing even by today's standards. Controls have been given a slight tweak in Shenmue on the modern systems. You now are able to use twin stick movement in a restricted form. This may be difficult for today's gamers to use, but it is an improvement over the awkward original movements. The controls in the fighting sections are also a little clumsy, but manageable. However, the sheer number of fighting moves is very impressive, even surpassing many dedicated fighting games. Given that this game was originally intended to be a virtua fighting RPG game, this comes as no surprise. In 2001, when this game first launched, Sega had agreements in place with companies such as Timex and Coca-Cola to have real-life products in the game. This was originally implemented in an unusual manner, given that the Timex watch in this game was not released in real life until 1997, 10 years after the game was set. But sadly, in 2018, Sega have opted to remove this branding to avoid further licensing fees applying. The result is not entirely noticeable, and unless it was mentioned, I doubt most people would have even have noticed.
Did they notice us? Come on, don't stop. Let's go.
Shenmue 2 is a slow burn of a game. It's a deliberate design choice, and I for one appreciate this choice, as it makes it even more rewarding when you reveal the next area, the next item, or the next plot twist. This is a Chinese style drama, except that you are playing out the main protagonist role, and I feel that this format just works. Sadly, the game is not without its flaws. The voice acting is the main gripe that I have with this game for the NPCs. The controls could have been given a bit of an overhaul, but technical restrictions perhaps restricted their options. The textures are just so limited. No, scratch that. In past they are just straight up horrific. But it's a product of its time, so you gotta give it a pass for that. Which leads me to the single biggest gripe with this game. Sega has released a straight up port, with very few if any changes. For purists this is a good thing, but meanwhile, and the details are sketchy at the time of recording, Sega were exploring the possibility of releasing a total remake of Shenmue, but looked to have abandoned the project early in its developments. This news really hurt me, but I must review this game for what it is and not let issues like this affect the review, but I feel that it needed to be mentioned. On the flip side, Shenmue II is an ambitious title that delivered so much for its time, and a lot of what it has to offer still holds up today. It was released in 2001 when other games of its era, like Max Payne, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Final Fantasy X and Grand Theft Auto 3 were also trying to make huge strides in gaming technology. But Shenmue II stands out proudly amongst the releases of this year as a truly important and innovative title for its time. There is so much to do in this game, not to mention the mini games within the game. And playing Sega classics such as Afterburner and Hang On is like the ultimate homage to Sega's grand past. You'll find yourself pushing Rio to get to the end. This is a game that I feel that any gamer wanting to explore the important releases throughout history must play. You need to look at this game as a car collector would view an old classic. It may not have the latest gadgets, power or features, but for its day it was a thing of beauty and something that others envied. Shenmue 2 is a true classic. My score of 7 is only a reflection on this title being released in 2018 unchanged. It was a 9.5 in its heyday in my books. On an emotional scale of personal preferences, I'd give this a 9, but I realise that this is a review, and I'm simply scoring this as if to advise someone in a totally non-biased fashion. If you start off on this Shenmue adventure, you won't regret having done so. You need to get on board to see what the hype and hysteria really is about.
When he is ready, he shall seek me out, and we shall brave together the rocky path.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed my look at Shenmue 2. Don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And please also check out my Patreon page if you want to help to keep the channel running. That is one really good way to help out with the channel. And until next time, my name has been Brian and I've been gaming since Spaceys. Thanks guys.
Since Spaceys.